What is up, guys? This is Zach from Angler's Escape, and in front of me I have 5 different lures that are excellent for pond bass fishing. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started with number 1 and work my way through them. But my favorite bait for pond fishing, as far as crankbaits go for bass, are square-billed crankbait. The reason I like square-billed crankbait so much is they are shallow water, and most ponds aren't very deep. So when you get one of these shallow running crankbaits, and they provide a lot of erratic action with these square build, I catch a lot of fish. For pond fishing, my favorite crankbait that is a square build overall is the Kevin Van Dam Strike King square build. But for pond fishing, I would use a 1.5. They're a little bit smaller, and usually pond bass aren't massive, so I get a little more hits on a 1.5 versus a 2.5. But they both work. I would pick the 1.5 though. I really like the gizzard shad color, which is just a little white with this black dot here. The other one I like is the bluegill color. Those are my 2 favorite colors, and I'd get the 1.5. So let's go ahead and move on. Number 2 for my favorite bass fishing lures for ponds, and that is an inline spinner. Specifically, I really like these Blue Fox inline spinners. If I'm going for numbers and I just want to catch the most fish possible, I throw in one of these inline spinners on 4-pound test line, and I'll catch tons of bass on them. If I just want to catch anything like bluegill along with the bass, I'll use a real small Panther Martin inline spinner, and I usually catch a lot of bass that way, along with bluegill and crappie and other stuff in the pond. So inline spinners, especially on those sunny days, are my number 2 pick for pond bass fishing lures. Number 3 is a jointed crankbait. These just give so much action. When you see them run through the water, it's ridiculous how much movement they have. I usually choose a little bit smaller jointed crankbaits for ponds because, again, the pond bass aren't quite as big as those in the big reservoirs. But I really like these jointed crankbaits. They provide a lot of action. If you do have some deeper areas in the pond, these bills can get down to those deeper areas. But I catch a lot of fish with these jointed crankbaits. And so my 4th favorite bass fishing lure for ponds is a topwater popper. And if I was going to a pond, this one right here, I've caught about probably 20 bass on. You can see there's a lot of marks on it. This is mainly I've used bass fishing in ponds. If I'm going to a big reservoir or something with bigger bass, I'll use a bigger popper, but in ponds I'm only using a popper that's about 1.5 to 2 inches long. Here's another one. This is a Head and Tiny Torpedo, another great topwater popper, and they don't have to be huge, especially for ponds, but at dawn and dusk they seem to work really well, and there's nothing funner than using a topwater popper and seeing those fish explode out of the water. So let's go ahead and move on to number 5 for fishing lures for bass and ponds, and that is jigs and worms. And so the nice thing about these is, especially like these football jigs that have a snag resistant wire right here, is that you can fish heavy cover or areas with lots of snags in the pond and you're not going to get hung up. Another thing is these like jigs right here are so cheap. They're like 20 cents each when you break it down, that if you do snag, it's not a big deal. I do catch a lot of fish on them. And then of course a weedless worm in those ponds that have a lot of weeds, lily pads, and other snags, you just barely hook the offset hook into the worm itself, so that you can pull it through any weeds and anything like that, and it works great for those overgrown ponds, and I catch a lot of fish on them. But I hope you learned something here today, and you'll try out one of these lures when you go pond fishing next, and thanks for watching.